In this section, we're going to talk about what exactly responsive web design is. The word responsive has been a buzzword for, I'd say, the last couple years. When responsive web design came out, people thought of it as more complicated than it needs to be, or than it really is. So what is responsiveness? It's pretty easy to understand. It's just an approach to designing websites that offers easy browsing and navigation on a wide range of devices. So essentially, a responsive website should respond to whichever size of the window or the device. Responsive sites should work and look great on all screen sizes and resolutions. There should be minimal to no zooming, panning, and resizing. If the user has to zoom in or resize anything, then it's not a true responsive website. And on a responsive website, the layout changes depending on the window or device width, and that's done with media queries, which we'll talk about a little later. So to put it simple and clear, the main goal of responsive web design is to give the user the best experience possible, no matter which device, resolution, or browser they're using. It should be the same experience across all the devices that are available. So, talking about devices, here is the most popular devices that people are using to browse the internet. First, we have desktops and TVs and widescreens. Some people have their computers hooked up to maybe a 60-inch TV or maybe a smart TV. So you have to think about those huge screens as well. I know that those are left out in a lot of areas. Then we have laptops and mini laptops, iPads and other tablets, mini tablets such as the iPad mini, and smartphones, which is obviously probably the biggest device to really make sure that your site's optimized for. And of course, there's more to come. There's always new inventions and devices coming out, so I'm sure this list will grow as the future moves along. Alright, so responsive design tips. I'd say the biggest tip of all is to keep everything simple. Keep it clean and semantic, but simple. Use HTML5 doc type and guidelines. Use simple techniques for elements. And a really important aspect of responsive web design is having a fluid layout. So what that means is we want to use percentages for the width of certain elements instead of a fixed amount of pixels. And that can be really tough. I can totally understand that because I've always been a designer that has used a 960 pixel layout. And now I'm starting to use fluid images and fluid layouts, and it's working really well, so I definitely suggest that. And you want to use optimal media queries, so you want to choose the correct screen sizes, which we'll go over in a bit. And so there's three key components to responsive web design. If your design is missing any of these, then it's not a true responsive site. First, we have fluid and flexible layouts, and as I was just saying, you want to use percentages instead of fixed widths. You can still use fixed height, or if you want, fixed padding and margins, or you could just do everything in percentages. You want to allow elements to be sized according to the browser's default styles. So you want your elements to respond from whatever size the browser's default styles are. For example, we want to set the text in the body to 100%, and this would set the font to match the size of the window, so you don't have huge letters and words on a tiny screen. Flexible images. You basically want to size your images with dynamic resizing and CSS. We should use percentages when dealing with image widths. And then we have CSS3 media queries, which is really the bread and butter of a responsive website. And it's very powerful because it allows us to assign certain style sheets or just inline styles for certain screen sizes. And we can do from a range, for instance, a media query for a tablet would be somewhere around 768 to 1024 pixels. For a smartphone, some of the bigger phones are 320 pixels to 568 pixels. So if that sounds like gibberish to you, don't worry, we'll talk more about that later. So let's see, we have a couple examples here, and each website we have 4 different versions for, and this version here would be the largest, which would most likely be on desktops and TVs. And then we have a slightly smaller version, which I would guess would be for large tablet devices or maybe laptops. Then we have this version, which would be for maybe smaller tablets. And then here is the mobile version for a smartphone. Now you can see there are differences. Some of them are not too noticeable. You can see that the image has changed slightly, the sizing, the padding on the side and the margin on the sides. Let's see, the most noticeable change is with the mobile layout, which has a vertical menu as opposed to these that have the horizontal menu, and that's a very popular technique or strategy when designing a mobile site or a mobile layout. You want to have your navigation come vertically. So this example, you can see when it's slightly smaller than the desktop version, you can see this little sidebar or this box goes underneath. All right, so it goes from basically a 3-column to a 2-column. And then we have a little smaller version, and you can actually change images. You can use different images, background images, depending on what the size of the screen is. And then we have the mobile version here. All right, so we're basically stacking everything on top of each other, and that's a real common thing in responsive web design. Mobile sites will have just stacks. There'll be one column with everything stacked on top of each other. Here's a couple more examples. You can see this one, very elegant looking site. The iPad or the laptop version doesn't look much different than the full version. You just see less of the image. If you go here to the smaller tablet version, the sidebar ends up on top, so it's now a header. Same thing here in the mobile version. And this site here actually has a pretty good example of fluid images or flexible images. You can see it's changed with each variation. It's very small here with the 1-column layout. So frameworks. There are a lot of HTML5 responsive frameworks. One of, if not the most popular, is Twitter Bootstrap, which we have dedicated the second part of this series to. It's very popular and very useful. We'll check out some of the other frameworks as well in the Tools of the Trade section. Not really use them, but just talk about which ones are available to us. So that's it for this section. Next we'll be getting into responsive web design strategies.